Oh, welcome. I'm Jim. I'm a retired Intel engineer from the Xeon design team, and before that, the Alpha microprocessor design team back in the 90s. Today we're going to do an unboxing. This giant box right here, and you can see with the heavy stickers on it, it should be a lot of fun wrestling it out of the box. And that what it is a Silverstone RM52 rack mount server case. This is going to be part of a home lab build that I'm working on. In fact, you can look at a different video to watch me actually build into it. This particular case is all about utility. So no big RGB or big blings or anything. It's all about being able to support a variety of different server hardware and uniquely a variety of different cooling solutions as well. And that I've had this box for a few days. I've been dying to open it up and having a look at it, so let's get started. Let's start by cutting it open. Let's have a look and see what's inside. It looks like right off the bat we have it double boxed, a box within a box. The top looks to be all the various hardware accessories. Next up we have our, looks like a styrofoam around the case on that. So let me wrestle it out of the box. Take it out of the paper here. Before I open up the actual chassis itself, let's take a look what's in the accessories. I have on the table all the accessories that come in that extra accessory box from the case, so let's kind of walk through them one by one so we can get through the details. So starting over here, we have the brackets that's to support a server redundant power supply. That is the 2U 1+1 CRPS type power supply. It's meant such that if one side of the power supply goes out, the second one can take over. So it's kind of a redundancy in a server situation. And this is the outer cage that would use for those power supplies to stick out, and you would have your two sockets that you can plug in. And then this bracket is used on the inside to support the power supply, so you can kind of tie it down to the bottom of the case and get some hardware associated with it. Next, we have a couple different PWM fan wires. These are the 4-pin kind. We have some zip ties and wire tie downs. Over here we have 4 feet. So these feet are meant when you want the case in a vertical format. So you're not in a case where you're not going to be putting it inside a server rack, but instead putting it on the floor, say as a workstation. You can use these feet on the bottom of the case to support it in that tower or vertical position. They got hardware associated with that. The handles here have various different brackets, so if we're going to be attaching the brackets or having the case in that workstation format, these plates here are used to support these brackets on the top, so one could lift the case up from and carry it around, or we can have it in a server horizontal rack orientation where you would attach the bracket to the side and then pull it out of the rack. And we got hardware here. Down here uniquely is a separate cage that can be installed on the back of the case right above the graphics cards, and they're two 80mm fans used to pull extra air or get an extra exhaust out of the case. And we have hardware associated with that. And then finally we have various different bags of screws and other hardware. One for the graphics hold down, which we'll talk more about in a different part of this video. We're going to have a motherboard hardware for tie downs, or standouts I should say. We got some screws for hard drive attachment. And then finally, we have this extra wire. Now this wire is used for yet another option on the power supply. Now the case supports a regular ATX power supply, but you can, in addition, install a second SFX power supply. So besides the server redundant, you can go more redundant power supply on the ATX SFX side of things. And when we're doing the SFX install as a separate one, it gets installed further in the case. So the back side of the power supply is not sticking out. So since it's not sticking out, that leads to a problem of how do you plug it in? Well, what Silverstone has done is they included this extra wire that will connect to that back side of that SFX power supply, and then you can install this bracket on, or this socket, I should say, on the back of the case, such that you can plug in the power wire here on it and that. Now the case itself, this is a full 5U in height. That's 220 millimeters or 8 2/3 inches tall. And that it is, the width of it is standard for a server rack. So this is 440 millimeters or a little over 17 inches. And in terms of length, we have 22 inches or slightly over 22. Before we open it up, let's have a look at the outside of the case. So up front, you can see we have a little control panel. It has your power button, which has an LED light integrated right in the middle of the button. We have a reset button, an HDD or a hard drive activity light, and interesting enough, 2 LAN activity lights in that. I suspect that's if your motherboard supports it, but we'll find out later in the build. In terms of USB expansion, we've got 1 Type-C and 2 Type-A, which is, with my understanding, is their 3.0. Having the USB connectors is actually kind of convenient. My plan is when I put this into the rack is to remotely log into it. So I don't need direct access to it in terms of connecting a keyboard and monitor. But there will be times that I might need to go down and have that direct access. And what I'm imagining is having this and perhaps some other dedicated servers in it and being able to walk up to it and connect a keyboard dongle directly to a USB connection on the front. And then maybe I keep that keyboard inside a drawer in the server rack, and that way I can be very flexible in terms of which one I'm providing input at a given time. All right, so the case, the front, can pop right off. So let's pop this right off here. It has like a little pressure connectors on the front, and you can see we have a dust collection, or not collection, but dust screen covering the entire opening of the case, keeping the inside of the server clean when there's a lot of air coming through it. And you can see where all this air is coming from. We have 3 120 millimeter fans that can go on the front. Now, one of the neat things you can do on the front of this case for the 360 millimeters, you can actually take the tray out and work on the outside. There's a screw on each side of the case that you can take out. I already have the other screw removed. And then you can push on these tabs and move it right out. And that way you can work on putting your radiator and whatnot inside it, outside of the case, and then move it right back in. Or maybe work on your fans. And in fact, there's actually more of a secret inside it beyond this opening, which could help cool it in that. But we'll cover that in a bit later. Now, if I turn the case on its side, one of the first things that pop out to me are the 4 things that are sticking out here. That's where we can attach a rail system in that. And it's actually a toolless connection that Silverstone creates to put rails on it, so you can pull this entire thing out of a server rack like a drawer and that. And you can, in terms of bracketing, they have this bracket that can go on the front here, and that will attach it to your rack. Or you can also attach this handle to the front, which makes it easy to pull out that drawer system and on the rail, so you can kind of pull it out and work on it and that. So there's one of each side. Now, let's say you didn't have a server rack and you want it to be more of a workstation. There is an option to put it on vertical instead of horizontal. So here it comes with feet that you can attach. There's two more that would go on each side. And then you can lift it up and put it on the vertical case. And then on top of the case, it has two handles that you can attach to help carry it around. Now let's take a look at the back of it. Now on the back, the first thing we see is an opening right here for a power supply. Now this supports a whole variety of different power supplies. Obviously ATX, but there are other standards they can do in terms of redundant. I believe it's a mini or 2U type standards. It does come, I believe this is an extra bracket that we can use to put in here to support a different standards. And you see another opening on top. That's one of the other secrets they have that I'll show you when we get on the inside, and that it can even do redundant power supplies. We have our standard motherboard connection opening, and then right above it a fan that can be fan opening, which could be exhaust, 120 or 140 millimeter fans. It actually comes with a 140 millimeter fan. It has the full 8 PCIe slots, so it depending on the type of motherboard and what kind of cards you had, we can do the full standard there. And then finally up here is another interesting exhaust option, which is this extra fan cage. It has two 80 millimeter fans that come with it, and you can attach this to the back by just sliding it inside here and then screwing it down. And that way it has the option to pull more air across your graphics card or whatever your expansion card's in that to really keep it cool. Now that I've teased you enough by having a look around the outside of the case, why don't we open it up and see what we have on the inside. Now the first thing we have to do is actually remove a bunch of screws that are on it. They have, what, 2 screws on each side plus 2 in the back. So let's go ahead and remove those. Alright, so with all the screws removed, we can now open up the case. There's a little handle back here that we can grab and give a pull till it stops, and then we lift it right on out. As I take the lid off, one of the first things that jumped out to me was this chassis intrusion switch, and that you can see it right here with the cable and that. It has a very nice satisfying click to it. The other thing that jumps out to me is this retainer bracket that's right here on the top, and that this is used to hold down your expansion cards. It actually is flexible to be able to support putting it in various different positions. You can see at the very top it's attached by a couple different screws, and you can actually slide it towards the back or towards the front and attach it wherever you need. Now let me take it off so we can take a closer look. Here's the retainer. You can see these handles, or these brackets, they actually adjust up and down on it. So you can move it down and hold, say, each side of your card. You got a wide card or for a thin one, and that way it keeps it from moving. You know, if we have this in a vertical workstation mode, in that you're not going to have your GPIO sag down, or even if in the horizontal, by locking it down on these fingers, when you're pulling the chassis in and out, you don't have to worry about the graphics card moving. And you can see on the top right here, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of where these fingers are positioned for exactly the needs of the graphics card or whatever PCIe cards you have. The other thing about this bracket that we'll see here is it has room to attach hard drives to it, whether those are 2.5 SSDs or even the spinning Rust hard drives. And that it gives you a couple different positions to place those, at least at this part. There are other places to attach it as well. This is just the first part. I showed you the 360 millimeter radiator option with even the tray that can come out, but I said there were even more options of secret in the inside. You can see right here, this bracket gives you another option for 3 more 120 millimeter fans or a second 360 millimeter radiator. So this case actually can support 2 360 millimeter cooling, which is very cool if you have graphics cards in it that need that cooling, perhaps even multiple graphics card. This bracket that you can attach the fans or the radiator for has this air scoop on the front, and I think the reason why they have this up here is to divert the air, such that if we look on the front of the case here, the air for the 360 comes in down the bottom, but when we have this attached on the top, this is directing air from the top of the mesh here into these set of fans. That way you can have cool air for both the bottom and the top of the case, which really can be effective at cooling this server chassis out. Looking deeper into the case here, we can see that there are 2 more, or on this side over here we have 2 2.5 inch SSD sleds that you can detach and connect to and then quickly edit. You also have 2 more on this side. I wouldn't say this is a NAS drive chassis, and that still having the option of putting up to 6, because we've seen there's 4 brackets in here plus 2 more on that retainer on the top. Really does give options of putting a lot of drives in this. Actually, I forgot to mention one more location, which is this cage right here. This cage actually can support 2 more hard drives. In fact, the spinning 3.5 inch rust drives can go inside here and that. And this also has a story with the power supply. So I said this opening right here is the standard ATX opening, and you can see we have a pretty deep connection right here. That if you need more depth, this can actually be removed, or in addition, you do have the option to install SFX power supply in it. So we can actually have 2 different power supplies. We can have our main primary one here, and we can have a secondary one inside this cage. And in the case of the secondary one, if that's the case, it comes with an extra cable that can connect to it, and that's where it comes out the back here on this little connection. So this is where we can actually bring out the main power in this part right here, so we can plug it in. Finally, I want to talk about the motherboard, which can install here, you can see on the tray. It supports all sorts of different motherboards, from the micro ATX, the mini, the regular, the extended, even a couple server options in terms of EEB or CEB. The tray itself could actually be removed. It is attached on the bottom with screws, not rivets, so we do have the option to pop the tray out and install the motherboard on it, and then we can just put it in a hole back in here and just screw it in from the bottom, which gives things more convenient in terms of trying to work instead of working around inside this chassis itself. In terms of cooling, with the motherboard attached, it can support up to 181 millimeters of cooler height, and that's with this bracket attached. If this bracket is not actually used, it can go up to 192 millimeters, which is really sort of the full height of this case. With no glass or fancy shapes or etc., some might say this is a pretty boring case. Square black box. But for those that prefer function over form, certainly be very pleased with this sort of drive. It sort of reminds me back of the builds I used to do way back in the early 90s. Now, something of this nature is certainly not cheap. In fact, this case is over $500 on that. But from my point of view, it's actually an investment in my home lab, and that because down the road I can see the contents coming and going in this case, but this case being a constant, something I continually use, and with all the flexibility it has, it can grow and meet my needs at any given moment in time. I picked this out based on its specs and my needs. Silverstone didn't sponsor this video, didn't send it to me, so I just purchased myself, and I'm excited to get going and actually build this for my server rack. So with that, I want to thank you, my friends, for watching. I'm truly grateful for you to take the time to join me in that, and I hope to see you again in a future video. Thank you.